start with a video. Many of you have seen this, but it's always worth starting out a lecture like this or a webinar like this with. So I'm going to pull that up.
(1847), Missouri prohibited teaching blacks to read or to write. Yes, this is history, but I'm here to tell you that this history has a legacy, and this legacy has legs, and those legs walk into your school, and they predict your practices and your policies and your beliefs around building literacy for children of color. Our founding fathers held and perpetuated the belief that the Africans were an inferior race. And they perpetuated that belief that their intelligence would never be equated to whites, particularly the whites that held them captive. But you know what? In every concrete, there's a rose. And in my research, I discovered that in the 1700s and 1800s, most, if not all, the Africans that were enslaved, those that were allowed to learn to read and write, they used a method that required the learner to spend long hours memorizing the alphabet, and then columns of vowels and consonants and double letters and 2 syllables called easy syllables. And they practiced those sounds, bay, bee, bye, bo, boo, up to 6-syllable words. And they kept saying them aloud, forwards and back again. And after memorizing those letters and sounds and symbols, the learner connected it to a text. But then there were other Africans that were enslaved, that lived in states that had anti-literacy laws, that granted them permission to rotely memorize biblical passages through oral repetition, never giving them an opportunity to actually hold the text in their hand and to track the words they were reading. Does this sound familiar? And I'm going to step on some toes here, but I'm going to reveal to you my truth. In this walk in education, I have moved in and out of schoolhouses where we have debated. Do we teach phonics, or do we hold them in shared reading and get them to memorize passages? And memorizing the passages will teach them the words, and teaching them the words will tell them the story. Even though research says that in order to be a fluent reader, you have to know the code. And so I ask you, why do you withhold the code from some children? Why are you sitting in schoolhouses that are still grappling with whether or not you should teach the code? Maybe it's because you're swimming in the anti-literacy laws. And so I ask you, why do we debate and make decisions about children's lives and decide whether or not they come out as readers to make ourselves feel good? Because my historic hero, Frederick Douglass, taught me that once you learn to read, you will forever be free. I hear Frederick Douglass crying out to me that the freedom lies in their literacy. And yet, we want to say that that is old news. Oh, it is? In Gary B. versus Snyder, that happened this year, the class action suit filed against the state of Michigan using the 14th Amendment, they stated that students who attend 5 of Detroit's lowest performing schools are receiving an education so inferior and so underfunded that it is as that they are not attending school at all. And let me remind you what that 14th Amendment tells us. Nor shall any state deprive any person of life or liberty. Well, if freedom lies in literacy, and students are walking into buildings that are not giving them the opportunity to become fluent readers, where is their liberty?
All right, thank you all. I know some of you have seen that several times because it's one of my favorite videos to start out with. I'm going to start my PowerPoint now. So hold on 1 second while I do that. So we're really lucky to be here and so fortunate that you're all here. I'm going to start with my story, which is really my son's story. He went to public school. He went to a public progressive school. All I heard from kindergarten, first grade, second grade, even pre-K, he's bright, he's a joy to teach, but he never learned to read. He was learning to think clearly, but he was not learning to read. We had to go to the private sector. We got tutoring. We went to a camp. We hired a neuropsych, but we told the school our family had dyslexia. It ran in our family. My husband, two of my nieces, two of my sisters all had dyslexia. It runs in families. The school didn't have anyone who knew how to teach reading, much less teach reading to a dyslexic kid who needs the same thing most kids need to learn to read. They couldn't teach him. We pulled him out. We sued the city. We got him into the Windward School for kids with dyslexia. He became a reader in 5th grade. They said he was reading as though he had never been to school before. But the addendum to the story is he got into Bard High School Early College, and we just went on college tours around the country to figure out where he's going to real college. We're really lucky, but we left a lot of kids behind. My co-host here, Janelle, is also working to help all those kids he left behind. So Janelle, can you introduce yourself?
Hello, thank you so much for having me. My name is Janelle Hemmings. I'm a literacy specialist in the Department of Education. I started out as a special education school improvement specialist in 2010. I was charged with supporting teachers with literacy instruction and behavior. Then I discovered that I really had no tools to provide teachers with that support. So I decided to seek certification or professional development on my own time with my own money and go get certified in what is called Orton Gillingham or structured literacy. I literally had to leave the state in order to come back and bring that specialized instruction and support to teachers. But I've been doing this for about 5 years under this certification, and I'm extremely excited to share the approach that many teachers do not get in their pre-service education. So I'm really, really excited to be here.
Thank you so much. All right, so we're going to go over some facts about the literacy crisis and why it exists. And we're going to let you ask questions. We're going to talk a bit about advocacy after that, and then identification. And how are we going to tell our curriculum casualties, kids who are just getting poor instruction, from kids that truly have learning disabilities? We'll talk a little bit about how you can help your kids at home, but really, we want to change things systemically and how you can join us to do that.
So the lack of teachers' knowledge about how to teach kids to read is not only reflected in test scores. It's really reflected in our teachers' knowledge of how to do that according to 40 years of science. And the great Desmond Tutu has said, we need to stop just pulling out of the river. We need to go upstream and find out why they're falling in. And that was my issue with supporting teachers. I'm like, they kept coming to me explaining, oh, this student is not able to read. What am I to do? And I really couldn't figure it out. So I literally had to go and seek the best researchers and professional developers, college professors, in figuring out how to support the pedagogy. Debbie?
Yeah, so our message is that it's not your kid. It's not really your teacher or your principal. It's something bigger and more systemic that has to change. Are you surprised to learn that in New York City or New York State, K-3 teachers are not licensed by their ability to teach reading? Are you surprised to learn that many principals do not know much about about the science behind how kids learn to read? And so many publishers offer reading programs based on how good readers read, rather than on how kids learn to read. It's like skipping T-ball and coach pitch Little League and going right to kid pitched. So this is why we're here. We know many of you associated with National Action Network know the Matthew effect in the Bible. The rich get richer and the poor get poorer. In reading, those that learn to read start to learn more, and those that can't read learn less. And these are the results. We're going to start with a quick poll. Janelle, can you take us through it? And Jackie, can you put it up?
Sure. Hopefully everyone can see it. In your community. In
You
your
would
community.
have to, I'm sorry, stop sharing your screen, I believe. Let's try it that way, because I did launch it.
I can see it.
I see it.
Oh, good. Okay.
Okay, so it says in your community, have you met, and you pick a specific answer. Anybody that never goes to a bookstore or library to get a book? Anybody that flips through newspapers looking at headlines? Anybody that seems to read okay, but just can't spell? Nope. Everybody in my community can read at 8th grade level. So
All right, let's get to about 80% and see how we're doing.
About 30 more seconds. I forgot that I can't participate. That's why I didn't see the poll up.
All right.
So I'm going to end it now.
Yeah, you want to show us the results? Oh, we got 6% of people that everyone can read. Congratulations. That's a little too low, don't you think?
Absolutely.
All right. So we're going to talk about this now. So we have actual neurodiversity in our schools. In an early classroom, kindergarten, first grade, we're going to see a couple kids that already know how to read. They're over here on the left. I put them in dark green because we have a continuum from dark green to light green here of how kids learn to read and how easy it is to acquire literacy. We've got some kids that seem to be driving Teslas. The kids in blue have Formula One race cars or something. These kids are in Teslas. They're still working the car. They're doing some stuff, but it's going pretty automatic. We have a bunch of kids stalled in a parking lot, driving a stick shift, having a hard time getting that car to move, but eventually they're learning it. Maybe. It just takes them longer. They get good instruction, they learn. And then there are about 4 kids in every class that are dyslexic. Some might be mildly dyslexic, some might be profoundly dyslexic. So the kids on the left seem to learn despite haphazard and broad instruction, but they might have had a lot of help at home. A good friend of mine gave her kid hooked on phonics when she was 4 years old. She was reading before school. The teachers didn't teach her. Kids over here require structured literacy. Janelle, can you tell us what the haphazard instruction in school looks like?
Yeah, so for the students who would be considered at risk and those who are performing far below grade level, that's the yellow group and the red group, those students would most likely have been a casualty of instruction, whole word instruction, where they're taught early on how to memorize certain words, but there's so many words in the English lexicon. So the road to good reading comprehension consists of reading at least 98% of the words accurately. And if the students are practicing reading words wrong, guessing, things of that nature, their accuracy rate goes down and comprehension is compromised. So when they're taught to just memorize words or word call, it puts them at risk as they go through the upper grades. And that's what we're seeing here, haphazard instruction. And it's much harder to remediate that work.
It is. And you can even see schools that have phonics programs doing it haphazardly. Sometimes they have one phonics program in kindergarten and first grade, and then they switch to another one in second grade. Or sometimes the 3 different first grade teachers are using different phonics programs.
Or none at all.
Or none at all. So why do we need horizontal and vertical alignment in our schools? Janelle, do you want me to do this slide?
Yes.
All right, so this is a new slide in my series, but I really thought about like teaching music. What if one violin teacher works on stamina and how to hold the instrument and maybe introduces scales towards the end of the semester? Another violin teacher starts with the scales and notes and chords, but a third one starts with teaching kids how to read music and how to compose and write music. Well, when all these kids go up to second grade violin teachers, they're all going to have different skills. Nothing was aligned in that first year. All those teachers taught different things. And so all of a sudden, the second grade teachers not only have to differentiate for the neurodiversity in their classroom, but they also have to differentiate for instruction holes because the 3 different teachers gave these kids different skills. These are skills. This isn't content. It's not about, what kids could talk about. Maybe you could teach different content to kids and they could have interesting discussions because they all come from different things. But skills, you don't want kids to have different skills because then they won't all learn the content.
Yep.
So.
Okay. So phonics are necessary, but they're not sufficient. What having a grounding in the sounds and phonemes of academic English and a strong vocabulary and some background knowledge from read-alouds and conversations, experiments, field trips to museums done well will. So essentially, we want to give our students an opportunity to experience this vocabulary, but 95% of kids can actually learn how to read. There will always be some profoundly dyslexic child that needs more specific speech therapy, small group, one-on-one instruction, and a lot more practice than others. But if we teach reading well, starting with connecting sounds to symbols, the dyslexic kids will be apparent and not be mixed in with those struggling because of poor instruction. So we would actually have something closer to typical readers and dyslexic kids. So we really want to ensure that everyone is getting the same instruction, the same skills. What does that mean? The whole class will learn those consonant sounds, consonant blends, vowel teams, arc control, syllable types in a scope and sequence. And then we can begin to identify those who really struggle with the neurological issue of dyslexia.
Thank you. Yeah, we can move both of these kids over to the left really easily if we taught them right. And we'd see our 4 dyslexic kids and be able to teach them. So what is dyslexia? It's trouble with connecting the sounds to the symbols, decoding symbols and groups of symbols. Those are called graphemes, those groups of symbols. This is a definition from the International Dyslexia Association, and it has some problems that a lot of us really know about, but I'm going to point them out nonetheless. It is a specific learning disability that is neurobiological in origin. That's very true. The difficulties are seen when you don't have this fluent word recognition and you spell poorly and you have poor decoding abilities. You weren't taught to decode. Clearly, it's a deficit in that phonological, those phonics, that component of language. But here, I've bolded the words often unexpected in relation to the other cognitive abilities. We know it isn't connected to intelligence. We know dyslexia is not connected to race. It's not connected to poverty. It's connected to poor instruction. So we can't have this definition that says it's often unexpected because too many kids are not expected to read. They usually look a lot more like Janelle than they look like me. And we shouldn't have the provision of effective classroom instruction here because if our instruction is not effective, we're not going to see those dyslexic kids. And we talked about the secondary consequences earlier. It goes to reading comprehension because you're not able to read, so you can't comprehend things. You can't learn things. But then those other secondary consequences, the dyslexia rates in our prisons, the dyslexia rates among the homeless people, those are the real consequences. We also know that dyslexia represents about 80% of all learning disabilities. Some researchers say it affects 5 to 12% of the population. Others say 10 to 15. The people at Yale think it's 1 in 5. But compare that to the 1 in 60 in the autism spectrum. I don't want to take any resources away from the autism community. I think they deserve them all, but the dyslexic kids deserve some too. Hi, Jackie, can you pull up the poll on sounds? And Janelle, can you tell us what sounds are?
Well, great. So sounds are what we call phonemes, and it's connected to our language. In the English language, we have 44 phonemes, but there are like many ways to spell
Oops, Janelle, you just gave away the poll.
Oh, okay.
Well, that's okay.
So how many sounds and phonemes are in the English language?
But we have a lot of people that know this on here. So go ahead and answer.
Notice that. So we have 44 phonemes or sounds that are connected to the English language. I'm so like excited and interested in this content. I eat and sleep and drink this stuff. So there are 44 phonemes in our English language. So what do I have to do to close this out?
Okay, Jackie, go ahead and close that poll since we gave it away.
Sorry.
But we're going to pull up the symbols poll.
Perfect. Oh, somebody wasn't listening.
Yeah. So pull up the symbols poll.
Okay, so how many symbols or graphemes being the letters, are there in the English language? I didn't tell you that number. Take a guess.
All right, let's see the results.
Let some more folks answer. Only 46% answered. Give a guess, everybody. Okay, doesn't look like anybody else wants to answer, so I'll end it.
Well, we're kind of all over the map. Let me show you something. We talked about neurodiversity because we have a complicated code in the English language. Many of you know we have 26 letters. We just learned we have 44 sounds. There are about 250 symbols in our English language. Besides the letters, we have all those punctuation symbols, but also a symbol can be a group of letters that makes one sound. Like O-U-G-H, that makes 5 sounds. That's why we have 44. But let's see, A-I makes the long A sound. A constant E makes a long A sound. These are symbols that make a sound. Now, Russian is easier. Can you believe that? When we look at Cyrillic, we think it's really complicated, but really it's a lot easier than English. Spanish, a lot of people probably think, no, it's easier. Arabic is nearly 1-to-1 sounds to symbols. If you count their diacritics, those little dots and other things above the letters. Finnish and even Korean are 1-to-1. They were developed late after people studied other languages and thought they'd make a more simple language. So there are dyslexic people who speak and read all these languages, but some languages are much easier to decode. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about dyslexia. We have double deficit dyslexia. These are kids that just have verbal short-term memory. They might actually forget the beginning of the sentence by the time they get to the end of the sentence. They're not naming things. They're not able to pull down words quickly, like a list of animals or the days of the week. Or they might actually just be processing more slowly. Now, these kids can be taught to read. It might take more, but they can be taught to read. And sometimes you might have triple deficit dyslexia or quadruple or quintuple, but these kids can still learn to read to some degree. Sometimes things are comorbid with dyslexia, and good direct instruction still helps. Dysgraphia is trouble writing or organizing your thoughts on paper. Dyscalculia is number sense, trouble with that, and executive function issues. Now, executive function issues can really be mitigated with good instruction and how to use things like an organizer. It may not help someone look at a refrigerator and pull out food right away. Sometimes that kind of planning just doesn't happen well. But you can kind of think of a recipe. Recipes are often written to save space on paper. And halfway down the recipe, it says chopped onions. Now, if you don't have good executive function and read through and plan how you're doing things, you might burn the oil before you chop the onions. That's how executive function comes into life. And we have other things like attention issues, autism, visual or auditory issues, and other health issues. These can all be comorbid, but these kids can still be taught to read. Janelle, can you talk about this other issue? It's not really neurobiological dyslexia.
So the effects on the social, lack of early academic language at home is also a concern. Lack of language in daycare and preschool. Remember when we were babies, we heard our parents talk on the telephone, and we heard all the intonations and the prosody of their speech and their language. Well, with text messaging, a lot of kids don't get that because their parents are having full out conversations online that they don't get to hear. A lack of parent advocate, right? Poor instruction in school, and then lack of background knowledge. And this basically leads to what we call the Matthew effect. The rich get richer and the poor get poorer if you're not taught how to read. So when 85% of the curriculum that you actually learn in school is transferred to you through literacy and you can't read, then that's a barrier. When you're not a good reader, you disconnect from school, you drop out, okay? We have already discussed that learning to read is about 50% heredity. Debbie?
Yep. And so if your parents didn't learn to read, how are they going to be able to advocate for you? Do they know that you're not learning to read because it's the instruction? We hope so. And we want to share that information so they can advocate for you. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second and see if anyone has questions. And I want to start with a question, and people can answer out loud or put it in the chat. How old were you when you learned how to read? Jackie, how old were you when you learned how to read?
Well, it all depends. I was
Jackie was reading since she came out.
okay.
Even before that, her parents was
And my
her.
mother taught me how to spell my name Jacqueline using the Mickey Mouse song. So now I'm dating myself. Jacqueline. But my mother was an educator. It's not fair. I would say a little before 2, because once you're able to recognize letters, you're reading. It's same with my daughter.
There you go. Anyone else want to tell their learning to read story?
I learned pretty early too, Debbie. I learned really early. My parents taught me early, my mom, and I just had a speech problem. So I had to go to a speech therapist at 4, 5, 6 years old. And I still speak a little off. So, but that was my thing. And I think phonetically, if it was stronger, I wouldn't have had those issues. So this is some passion of mine, as you know, and I'm going to continue to push this thing through. So thank you.
Yep. And I bet that speech therapist actually helped you learn to read because she was helping you connect those sounds to your speech and your symbols. So
Indeed. Yes, indeed.
All right.
I
So
was
we're
6 years old when I learned how to read.
so any other questions before we move on?
I would just like to say something. I'm so glad that I attended. Thank you, Dr. Cody, as always. But I had put in the chat, you know, my son wasn't diagnosed until he was graduating high school. And as a mom, it was so devastating, but it was such an awakening, you know, thing for us because um, he was, it was told to me by a substitute teacher. And I said to myself, first thing I said was, how could this child go 12 years of school? He did have a learning disability, but not be diagnosed with dyslexia. And recently I was going through some things because he's 36 at this moment. But I was going through some things and I found you know, the documents that I had received, and it was like a book, you know, because it was, and what was good about it was after they did the assessment, you know, they were able to tell myself and my son the things that he needed to do to be able to self-advocate for himself, you know? And they kept saying to me that, you know, Mom, you did a great job, because I was just so devastated. Not that he had dyslexia, but that it wasn't recognized by the public school system, you know, that he had went his whole school life and never been diagnosed with dyslexia, and I knew nothing about it. But I knew that, you know, he had trouble reading, and I knew that everything that he did, I was just always so keen on giving him landmarks. Like if he went somewhere, you know, and I knew he couldn't read well, but I would, you know, write everything down and I would say X, Y, and Z. So I'm so glad now. And for the last couple of years, it's been really, people are so interested in dyslexia. I belong to a dyslexia group, and they're not even in this country, but I still attend because it's so good to be up on it. And when I meet parents that don't know, and they know that something is definitely wrong with their child, I just tell them, have them look for dyslexia. Now it's a little easier, maybe with the, you know, we're from New York, I'm from New York City. Maybe with this new chancellor and they want to put a school in or whatever, it will be better, because my son is a graphic designer, you know, went to college and a whole bit, but I know sometimes when he tells me that how hard it was, you know, but how he kept maintained it. So we didn't know. I didn't know. You know what I mean? As the parent, I did not know. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you for your story. You know, we knew my son was dyslexic. What we didn't know is that the teachers didn't know how to teach him to read, and that our neuroscientists, the neuropsychologist, was so disconnected from the school system. She didn't know that, you know, saying that he needed sets was not going to help him because the sets teacher didn't know how to teach him to read. So there's this disconnect from all over the place. Right.
I think we thought that Vanta said 6, but she said 26. She was 26 when she learned how to read. And I think that is a great accomplishment, no matter the age.
Congratulations, Vanta.
We don't want our children to, you know, go through schooling to that age, but no matter what, as long as you did it and you know how to read now, thumbs up.
Thank you. All right, we're going to go back to the presentation, but we're going to have more time to talk today. So we're moving on to advocacy. And it is an alphabet soup. We've got national laws that help people. The IDEA can help you get an IEP. Dyslexia is not in the IDEA. You can kind of find it hidden under the 13 categories. There is a specific learning disability category where a lot of dyslexic kids are, and also speech and language category where some dyslexic kids land. There was a bill in Congress to add dyslexia to the IDEA, but it also had that really bad definition that we went through before. So we did not want it in there until it has a better definition. I don't think it passed Congress. We also have the ADA. The ADA allows for accommodations like extra time on tests because you read more slowly. Maybe you need a separate space for your tests because you're easily distracted because you read more slowly. You can get a lot of things through the ADA. The ADA lasts beyond your K-12 education and can follow you to college and to the workplace. For instance, if you're hired to stock shelves and then asked to write a memo because something happened, and you cannot spell well and you cannot really write that memo, if you have declared your disability, you are protected by the ADA. You cannot get fired. We also have ESSA, the Every Student Succeeds Act. ESSA calls for evidence-based programs. It doesn't define evidence-based programs very well, but it calls for them. And that's what we need in our schools. Janelle, can you take us through what does happen in our schools and what should help kids? You're on mute.
Sorry, absolutely. So in our schools and districts, we're supposed to have something called academic intervention services. And what that looks like is when our children are falling within that yellow and red group, we have to provide something in addition to the core instruction through a response to intervention or a multi-tiered system of support. And this is like extra work that happens either before the school day or after. If your child is not making progress in this particular framework, then you would either get an evaluation inside the school or outside the school. Then there's something called an integrated co-teaching model, which is a special ed a classroom, general ed classroom that includes special education students. So there will be 2 teachers to support students who have IEPs. Then there's something called SETS, and this is special education support services. And what this looks like is more one-on-one support or small group. And then we have something called an independent educational evaluation. That is something you may get if you have concerns about in-school evaluation. Some parents prefer independent evaluations to occur. And this is what a different route that parents actually take in order to provide services, academic supports for their students, their children.
Thank you.
If
Then
I
there's-
may.
Sure.
Oh, great. I just wanted to clarify a couple of things, especially for our IEP and 504 plan. A lot of times in our communities, especially within the Black community, there is a stigma, just like with therapy. It's a long-running community joke that we go to Jesus for mental health care. And the IEP and 504 plan, we have to destigmatize these opportunities because other groups know how to take advantage, literally, of the IEP. Just because a child may have an IEP does not mean that they cannot get a regular diploma. In our communities, a lot of people believe that IEP automatically equals an IEP diploma, and that is not true. An IEP gives a student opportunity for, different, what's the word I'm looking for? Places where they can, just not a partnership, but opportunities for students to be able to receive the support needed to excel in their classes. And 504 is a little more or less restrictive than the IEP, but with with all of these, you can earn a high school diploma. And with the AIS, ICT, SETS, and IE, all of these are already funded. They're already funded. And we definitely need to talk more about AIS, because a lot of people run around trying to get their children extra tutoring and whatnot, when this is built into the funding. Every school receives AIS funding. So just wanted to make those points clear. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad you talked about that. You stole a little bit of my thunder, but I'm going to talk about it again later. But we have some resources in our community as well. The Council of Parent Attorneys and Advocates will help families for free. They're not going to go to court for you, but they'll help advise you on what you can do. You can get a family advocate from there. We also have nonprofit and pro bono and full price education attorneys that will go to court for you. And we have clinics in our universities and hospitals and some nonprofit clinics like the Promise Project. And we have full price neuropsych exams. They are different. You know, oftentimes when you go to a clinic, you're going to have a very transactional relationship with that psychologist. If you pay full price, you kind of keep them like you keep your pediatrician for your kid's whole life. And it's just different types of options. And we have tutors that can help. You really have to watch out with tutors and make sure you have the right training, and you keep them long enough, and you don't confuse your kids because you're giving them science of reading from the tutor and bad instruction in school. You have to really help your kids make that gap. So we can take some more questions if we have any. The next thing we're going to talk about is the signs of poor instruction and learning disabilities and how you might help your kids at home. But I'll stop sharing the screen right now and see if anyone else has some questions. So one thing that might not have been clear is the AIS is before you go to special ed. Most dyslexic kids probably could get helped with AIS. We call it response to intervention, or sometimes multi-tiered systems of support, and that is before special ed. You don't even need an IEP to get your AIS support. We just need the teachers that know how to teach reading to provide that AIS support.
And that can be in math, reading, and in behavior.
Exactly. You shouldn't have to get an IEP, but sometimes you have to do that. Any other questions? All right, we're going to hit the next slide. So we're wondering, how do you tell if your kid is a curriculum casualty or dyslexic? Is he in the yellow? He could learn to read with just the right instruction, or is it a dyslexic kid that needs extra instruction? So Janelle, can you take us through what dyslexia looks like in the youngest kids?
Sure. So we would definitely see mispronunciations like aminal or for animal, or paschetti for spaghetti. Language overwhelm, right? It's hard for them to receive the right words to tell us what they need. Following multi-step directions, you ask them to go get his shirt, his shoe, and the peanut butter, and then you might not bring back anything. Trouble rhyming, guessing letters and words, and in trouble separating and blending sounds, which is huge. It's a huge skill that is required for learning how to read independently.
Yep. So just for some examples, my son hated Sesame Street. He hated Dr. Seuss. He liked things, the shows that had a real arc to them, a real story. He liked books that had a real story and had that arc. But anything that just rhymed or was like too short and not interesting, he wouldn't do it. When he couldn't retrieve a word, he had the vocabulary to talk around it. Like, he once told me, he goes, that other ocean over there by California, because he couldn't retrieve Pacific. But he could do that. I didn't know it was a sign of dyslexia until later. So in upper elementary and middle school, what's going on with dyslexic kids, Janelle?
what's happening in middle school a lot of times is they're having trouble sounding out words. It's evident in their state assessment, in their unit assessments, curriculum-based assessments. We're seeing that they're not able to read independently. They have inconsistent spelling. Repetition is needed to learn. Teachers will always complain about how they have to say something over and over again or reteach. Avoiding reading out loud, which is fair. I mean, if you didn't learn the code, it's really hard for you to do something like that. Reading avoidance, language overwhelm, jokes, sarcasm. I don't do sarcasm anyway. Idioms, listening comprehension will well above reading. Definitely. These kids are really, really smart. They can interpret, they can have a great conversation with you, but when it comes to accessing language that's in print, it's very difficult for them.
Exactly. So those things will go on to high school as well. But, there's some kids in high school that got remediation, but they're still dyslexic. They still need extra time. Their listening comprehension still probably works better than their reading comprehension, but they can read. If they learned late how to read, their spelling is probably still inconsistent. That language overwhelm, they don't get it when their friends are being sarcastic or their own jokes fall flat. And mostly their cognitive resources are at a premium. A lot of people will think that they shouldn't put their kids in a foreign language. Well, these kids could learn a foreign language, but then you have to look at their time of day. Is it better that they have a study hall during the day and are able to do their homework and do their reading and their hard reading during the day instead of at night when they're really tired? So you really have to think about their cognitive resources if they're dyslexic. They may have learned to read, but there's still some stuff going on. So now we want to tell you a little bit about reading instruction and what you can do at home. So Janelle, can you take us through this infographic?
Okay, definitely. So this infographic kind of shows you the different pillars of our language and orthography. First, we would start out with something called phonology. That's the manipulation of sound and in our language system. Then we have something called sound symbol. This is where we get our spelling and we get our reading. We're able to connect the letters with sound, read words, read in general, just read. Then we have something called syllables. Syllables are the portions of each word that carry a vowel. And then we support that instruction through morphology, which is units of sound that carry meaning, right? This is where we get the prefixes and suffixes. Then we have what we call syntax. This is where we learn about our grammar and our sentence structure. And then we have our semantics, our grammar and the meaning that is being transmitted through print.
All right, so how can a parent help? Well, there's this book. It's really good for young kids, How to Teach Your Kid to Read at 100 Easy Lessons. It works pretty well, but you have to support your kid if they're getting antithetical work instruction at school. Hooked on Phonics helps a lot of kids still. Explode the Code is still really helpful. You can even buy those at a bookstore or Staples, and it can help a kid. But again, making sure they don't are told things like look at the picture or look at other words. They have to decode the word that they're trying to read. And mostly, and I'll put it in the chat at the end, knowing the 44 phonemes and pronouncing them well when you're helping a kid decode. We do not eat jaham out of a jahar. We can't add that schwa sound on the ja. It's really hard for me to do, but really practicing those phonemes as an adult will transfer them to a kid when you're helping them decode the sounds in words. So Janelle, can you tell us about how we're supposed to teach these things?
Definitely in a systematic, cumulative way. Programs like Spire or Wilson, or even like at the preventative level foundations, which a child might experience in their public school from K to 2 in New York City schools, it provides a systematic, cumulative way of introducing content, and it is very explicit. So if we're teaching students about the long A sound, right? There are several ways to spell the long A sound. So we have to be really explicit about, well, when do we spell it that way? Well, AY is spelled at the end of a short word, right? AI is usually not at the end. And then we have multisyllabic words that may have the long A, like in nation. Well, the A in nation is within a open syllable. So being really explicit about what they're going to experience in their writing and their spelling must happen. Then as teachers, we must provide a diagnostic for why a student might not understand this. And we may have to implement evidence-based practices that have been researched and proven to have high yielding outcome, to ensure that they are getting it and they're able to apply it in both their reading and their spelling. And so it's cyclical. It's a cyclical response to learning.
Thank you. And now this is the final infographic. Both of those are together, but there's more. Kids, we talked about before, need background knowledge. They need literacy knowledge. We need to know that literacy knowledge is that these things with these two cardboard things on the end are books, and there's pages in between, and pages are made of paragraphs that have a little space between them, and paragraphs are full of sentences that have a dot at the end, and those are made of words that have space between them, and the words are made of letters. We need to make sure there's a lot of vocabulary and use of language. Janelle talked a little bit about texting and not hearing all these words that your parents used to say. So how do you get this? You get it through talking and rich discussion and read aloud and audiobooks. And I know my friends from Learning Ally are here, and maybe they'll talk a little bit about Learning Ally at the end. And podcasts. And people wonder why audiobooks and podcasts are better than videos and television. It's because there's so much more vocabulary used in podcasts or on the radio. My father didn't like the color commentators for our college basketball team. And he used to put on the radio commentators, but have the basketball on the television. I learned so much about basketball because the radio commentators were explaining every little thing that was happening while I was watching it. They used a lot of vocabulary. And then fluency practice is really important for comprehension. If I saw a sentence that said, Jackie had the insight not to incite a riot, but I didn't have good fluency and good prosody saying those words, good intonation, I couldn't comprehend that sentence. Insight is spelled two different ways and pronounced slightly differently, and you have to have that kind of intonation to really understand the sentence. Storytelling and writing is important. You can start telling stories in pre-K or probably even younger, and you can start telling these stories and using manipulatives and dolls or Lego characters to start telling a story. You don't need to write it down to be able to communicate a story. We have social studies, arts, phys ed. Oh, I lost my science. Science should be in there too. I'm sorry about that. All these things, you start learning words and vocabulary that can feed into your knowledge and help with comprehension. High dosage tutoring is in here because if you get behind, you will stay behind unless you get a high dosage. You know, we always talked about how my son, he kept learning, but he was just kind of getting, staying behind all his friends because he wasn't getting the dosage he needed to catch up. You need a higher dosage than everyone else to catch up. Oh, there's my science. That's funny, it came at the end. So Janelle, what do you think about bell hooks?
It's great. Most children are amazing critical thinkers before we silence them. That is a powerful, powerful quote. I know that bell hooks believed in teaching to transgression. She valued another educator, Paulo Freire, who taught not to bank data for the sake of banking data. Neither were talking about early literacy instruction and phonics. Literacy is necessary to transgress.
Yeah. And now I put Desmond Tutu and bell hooks into my presentations early last year. They both died last year, and I'm a little worried I jinxed them, but I think these quotes are still worth keeping in here.
Thanks.
So we have a call to action. I'm going to put some stuff in the chat at the end. I can't do it while I'm presenting, but Dyslexia Awareness Day is coming up May 12th. It's on Zoom, and I hope you'll register. We want to increase the size and scope of the NYC DOE Literacy and AIS office. Right now, there's like 4 or 5 people down at Tweed trying to make sure all teachers learn how to read. We need people in every single district office that can get to every single school. And we need to create robust pre-service education programs based on the science of reading. This has to happen in our pre-service education. Teachers should have a sense of how to teach kids to read. They can get more professional development later, but they shouldn't have to get professional development on stuff that was invented in the 1940s. So I'm going to stop sharing. And Jackie, can you talk about the resolution?
Now, here's where everybody here can join us in this call to action. I'm going to ask everyone here if you are willing to help adopt this resolution. Much of the whereases you heard during the presentation. And thank you very much, Janelle and Debbie. Debbie and Janelle, wonderful as usual. This Reading for All resolution carries out the missions of our organizations, National Action Network and Decoding Dyslexia, by promoting the science of reading, AKA structured literacy, throughout the New York City, making it understood by parents and students and properly taught by teachers and promoted and supported by principals and administrators. So, as I said, a lot of the whereases was said, but there's one that sticks out to me big time. The National Assessment Educational Progress, sometimes called the Nation's Report Card, is the largest nationally representative and continuing assessment of what America's students know and can do in various subjects. In the latest report, released in 2020, only 35% of 4th graders and 34% of all 8th graders in the United States scored at or above NAEP proficient. Those who demonstrate solid academic performance and competency over challenging subject matter, which is down from the previous report. That means that 65% of all 8th graders nationwide scored below the NAEP proficient. That's what that means. So with that said, like I said, I'm not going to go through all the whereas. We're going to share it with you to look at it. We're going to go right to what we resolved. Therefore, be it resolved that the New York City Department of Ed use taxpayer funds to advance literacy curriculum or pedagogy directly aligned with the science of reading. The New York City DOE should place strong literacy and AIS offices in every district, including D79, to inform Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 instruction, creating a path to literacy for all students K through 12. 3, the New York City DOE should educate and inform parents, school leadership teams, district leadership teams, PTAs, teachers, principals, and DOE administrators on the science of reading and its impact on student achievement. A citywide leadership team can model these duties and provide guidance for alignment and cohesiveness among education stakeholders on the science of reading. The CLT should devise a plan as mandated by New York State Commissioners Regulations 100.11 and provide guidance to school communities necessary for AIS officers in every district to implement quality tiered instruction. Just a side note that when AIS is implemented the way it should be, children with dyslexia or other learning disabilities will be identified much earlier. So I just want to put a pin in that. 4, all New York City Department of Education schools should create a plan to align their literacy curriculum horizontally across grades and vertically through their school with the science of reading. 5, all teachers, but especially special educators, kindergarten, first and second grade teachers should be empowered to receive an in-depth and comprehensive digest of the science of reading, support and professional development to phase in the curriculum and pedagogy of structured literacy supported by the science of reading and writing. 6, pre-K and 3K teachers should be able to teach the building blocks of literacy, including but not limited to the 44 sounds of the English language. 7, curriculum for education majors and graduate students in education in public universities shall prepare pre-service teachers in the science of reading. 8, the literacy work in New York City should be a model for districts and teaching colleges throughout the country, ensuring every child can read, creating a better quality of life for American citizens. This ends the resolution. Once it is adopted, we will use this to push legislation to make sure that all of these resolutions are put into action. Are there any critiques, any advice, any edits? You could raise your hand or unmute if you have any thoughts. Hi, Fanta, Gina.
Yes. My question is, why is it only K through 12? What about the 3K and the 4K program that the DOE have? Can we include them too? Because their mind is still active in learning, even though they 3 and 4.
Definitely, yeah, that's number 6.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or edits?
One question or suggestion I have.
Hi, Natalie.
Hi, how are you? Thank you so much for everything you're saying. I'm fangirling over here. But one of the things that I'm not sure if this is even appropriate to be here, but I went to state school. I went to a public college, but I found that those who came from more expensive private colleges, they seem to take up a lot of space in a room because of their prestige. And I don't know about you, but I learned about, reading the symbols of brown bear at Bank Street workshops many, many times. So, just so understanding how we can sort of find a way to, create some unlearning opportunities for teachers who are already teaching that maybe are soaked in their pedagogy and believe themselves to be above question.
Oh my gosh, this is Susanna. I'm actually a professor of literacy, and I so agree, because literally Columbia and Teachers College and Bank Street are so much a part of the problem, or Lesley University in Boston, because they're still teaching MSV and other things. So I couldn't agree more. Plus the fact that we have a huge number of teachers going into the private sector and the public sector who have no idea how to teach reading. And literally, I do workshops all the time, and they don't know what they don't know the difference between phonology, etymology, orthography. Many of them say they've never even heard the terms, let alone. So the truth of the matter is, just because you pay for an education does not mean it's worth it.
Yeah, I went to, like I said, I went to state school and I went to Truro College. It's a private college. I did not learn about any of this. I didn't learn about anything about Orton Gillingham or structured literacy until like 2.5 years ago, going to a district education council meeting on children with reading disabilities, and I met Emily Hellstrom, and kept hearing Orton Gillingham, and then I took Orton Gillingham, and then my son was in remote kindergarten, and they're like, look at the picture, use your pointer power. And I was just, wait a second, this is everything I was told was wrong. So I'm homeschooling now, but it's been an exhausting experience because my school administrators really believe they're above reproach. And Debbie was part of my initial IEP meeting, and I called her my dragon slayer because just every gaslighting point she just knocked down with all her facts. And it was really, really frustrating for me because, how many times as a parent, you share your story, you write your emails, you share your science. I shared that amazing video, like, why are you withholding the code from my son? So I think that's a really big problem, is that there's a lot of hubris and resistance to the truth. And I don't even know where to begin with that as a mom, as someone who's considering entering into teaching at a school level, just because I'm curious what I could do. But I feel like that's something that is an obstacle.
I thank you so much for sharing that. Are there any other universities besides private and public? Because what you just said, Natalie, I think that we should add private here also because of your story. If we put, Debbie and Janelle, if we put private and public, are we leaving out any universities?
Technically, you're not, but the truth of the matter is New York State permits you to get certified through an online, you can get certified in New York State through an online program, because if this online university pays a fee in New York State, it permits that. And a lot of those are for profit. And it's a funny line whether they're public or private in some ways. But the other issue I think you guys have to address is the role that Pearson just once again redid the Foundations of Reading test, and it moved way more towards balanced literacy than it was before. And I'm having a heart attack on a regular basis.
Yeah, we might put something about our licensing tests, the state licensing test in here.
And it's the same thing with the Praxis 2. New York requires the Praxis 2 multiple subject, and there are literally limited or next to no questions about morphology, orthography, print awareness, which is what you were talking about earlier, Debbie, when you said like how words move in sentences and other things like that. Which is a combination of book handling skills and print awareness, but it's a problem.
Yep. And we should also include, and there's a nicer way to say this, the boot camp teacher training programs. And alternative pathways to teaching.
Right. So that would be Teach for America, which is technically a private, it's a not-for-profit, but it's private. So you should include, I would just say alternative route to certification, including DSAP, durational shortage programs.
This is great. Let's find them all. Wherever they can hide.
Okay, and all routes to teacher certification.
That covers pretty much everything.
Yeah, thank you both, Suzanne and Natalie. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other thoughts, feedback, edits, suggestions? Because your call to action is that you all are going to vote whether or not to adopt this resolution right now.
Well, I
tonight.
just saw Tina's comment. Do we want to say something about our Board of Regents and make it a statewide instead of have so much about the city?
I really thought that
We do have that last bullet about being a model for other districts.
right throughout the country.
Yeah.
You've got more chance of getting it passed if it's you stick with New York City and start there than if you go to the Board of Regents, which is caught up with the Carlisle group and all kinds of other things.
I couldn't say it better myself. I was trying to fish for something diplomatic to say, and you took the words right out of my mouth. It's a great idea, Tina, to consider them, but like Susanna said, they're so caught up in they are the red tape. So I'll leave that there. Okay, because we're being recorded, so I'll be nice.
But I think
that, like Debbie was alluding to, that since we say throughout be a model for, the country, ensuring every child can read, I think is inclusive of everyone. I think that works. Any other thoughts, suggestions, ideas?
There was a cool idea I heard in a seminar recently that said everyone who works in education should have some foundation in teaching literacy. Even the gym teachers should know how to talk morphology. And I thought that was really terrific. I don't know if that's
that is
something
actually, sorry, Natalie, that is actually a requirement in some states. So in Connecticut, every teacher pre-K 12 has to have a literacy course. And every teacher pre-K 12 has to have some initial exposure to the definitions and signs of dyslexia. It hasn't, by the way, I'm not going to tell you it's been 100% effective, but it is a requirement in multiple states, actually. That
I like
yeah.
Yep. The Windward School, where my son went, trains the art teacher and the phys ed teacher in how to use language properly for a dyslexic kid, how to make sure everyone in the class understood the instructions, and could do everything. So everyone was aware of language and dyslexia. And in fact, they were part of the meetings that the teachers had saying, we're going to work with these kids on R controlled vowels today. And so if an R controlled vowel word showed up in art or phys ed, the teacher would re-emphasize it.
See, that is
science and social studies too.
I love it.
Yeah, so Debbie, Janelle, and I, definitely Debbie and I, and Christina, we're going to be marching this up and down, all legislators everywhere, saying that this is what needs to be implemented. So we have our call to action, and I'm going to throw out there that we adopt this resolution and use it as a tool to make sure that what we resolved is actually implemented. And I'm going to ask if there are any objections.
And do we want more groups to sign on to this?
Yes, we will share it. Definitely email us and we will share it out. Groups can email and sign on, and we can keep a list of groups that do sign on to this.
Fantastic.
In support. So with no objections, I will declare that the Reading for All resolution has been adopted unanimously by the Forum National Action Network Education Committee and Decoding Dyslexia on April 26, 2022 at 8:21 p.m. And I thank you, all of you, for attending and being involved and being attentive and being you. So with that, I'll hand it back to Debbie and Janelle to close us out. Thank you all.
Well, thank you. I put an email address in the chat for my Decoding Dyslexia email, and you can certainly use that. I'm so glad everyone attended today. We're going to try to do this type of event more often. I'm associated with Risha Conroy from the Dyslexia Alliance for Black Children. Maybe Risha, you can put the website in the chat. And Learning Ally, if you could put your website in the chat if you're still here. And thank you all. Janelle, do you have any closing words?
Yes, it was a pleasure to be with you today. Really nice to see some new faces. I'm also going to put my business card in the chat. So if you want to talk about the Orton Gillingham or any literacy supports for students in need, please reach out. Yep. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. All right, does everyone copy everything they wanted from the chat?
Yeah, please make sure you email us if you want to receive this information. Decoding Dyslexia NYC@gmail.com and or nanedcommittee@gmail.com. And thank you.
And I'd just like to say,
Brother I was just about to say thank you, Brother Derek. Yes.
I just wanted to say thank you, ladies, for putting this together, bringing this issue to the forefront. Again, I'm very passionate about this issue, and I'm happy when I ran into Debbie. I know our education committee is doing a lot of things, a lot of great things since I've been here 4 years, and I'm glad that Jackie, Debbie, Gina, Janelle, and Christina Lasser, she's not on West Coast time, but the whole team, I'm very proud of you guys. So Reverend Sharpton has tasked me with the crisis and with the field department, and I just try to use that as best to my ability to see what's needed in our community. And I come from communities where a lot of my friends couldn't read. I'm formerly criminally impacted for 40 months, and while I was incarcerated, it was a lot of individuals could not read. I'm talking about the TV guide on the television. They could not read what's on the TV guide on the television set. And these men were 60, 70 years old, and I could not imagine making it through life, that old, through your life, without being able to read. And I'm of the belief, and again, if I'm wrong, I always like people to check me, but I'm of the belief if our children are taught the phonics, and I was a big believer in phonics growing up. I just couldn't get the different sounds. I didn't have a good teacher to teach me, but I'm thinking that would uplift our kids and put them in better circles to succeed. And not only that, with a lot of the things that's going on with the anger and the violence and the gun violence, having our youth be able to speak properly well, that will lead to conflict resolution. They will know how to deal with a conflict because they have the words and the language to combat that. So this is very important. It seems, a lot of people look on the surface, they just look at it on the surface, but if we really dig down and make an effort, this is the group here that's going to make an effort. We need every one of you. I've been pulling Debbie. Debbie's from a different organization, but I'll pull her into our crisis meetings every Friday, 11:30 to 1. She comes. She stays as long as she can, but she comes. I'm trying to get her to be a part of the National Action Network. For those that don't know, we run the National Action Network by our chapters, and within those chapters, we have some fantastic committees, and I'm blown away at the jobs the committees do. And anyone who's with the National Action Network, it's not just me. You go to individuals, you knock on their door. I'm with the National Action Network. You will have a seat at the table. And I just ask that no one abuses that power that is invested in us, that Reverend Sharpton built up in 31 years, that I use and utilize for the betterment of the community. I try to do what's best for the whole, the greater good. I'm not one who believes there's a blanket solution to everything. Every community, some individuals need different needs. They have different things they need. So, but I'm employing all of you. Join the National Action Network. It's only $25 for the year. Join a committee. And a lot of the times, Reverend Sharpton comes to the committee based on the issues. Jackie, you remember, they were talking about getting rid of the specialized tests. And Reverend Sharpton came to the education committee and he says, what is the pros, what is the cons, and what should the organization's position be? Now, I'm not saying he's going to just do whatever you guys say. Don't get me wrong, because he does a lot of research. Reverend Sharpton is an avid reader, and he's going to ask people, and he wants to see what other civil rights organizations line up as well. But he comes to the committees. He comes for your ideas. He comes for your input. So that can't be taken lightly by someone who's sitting with Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. We could get things done, guys. We can get things done with the National Action Network. So please come be a part of the organization, the chapter. We have a chapter in every borough, 3 in Brooklyn, 2 in Queens. I'm trying to get my Bronx chapter reactivated. So I'm putting that out there right now. And Manhattan is one of the best chapters in the nation. And we have chapters all over the country. So if you're not in New York City, New York State, please plug into a chapter, plug into a committee. That's the main part. Once you're in the chapter, plug into a committee. Our education committee right now, we weren't working exclusively or focusing on dyslexia. We're focusing on a whole bunch of other stuff that's catering to the kids, that's helping our kids. Debbie comes in, she'll be a part of NAN, she'll be part of the chapter, part of the committee. She could start her own dyslexia program right out of the committee, and it will be received. You guys have to know, 31 years ago, a young man named Eric Leroy Adams helped sign the incorporation papers for the National Action Network. So we have one of our own in City Hall. It was a joyous occasion for me to be able to take part in this first 100-day speech today. Very well received, and everybody know me, and it still that still blow my mind when I walk in places and people know me. And I don't know who these people are, but they know me. So this is the power of the organization. This is what I'm articulating to you guys. I want us to use this power to fix dyslexia, to fix a lot of other shortcomings in our education system. We have a good partner in David Banks, Chancellor Banks. He sits with me on the board of 100 Black Men as well, and I've known him sometime. So, and again, a lot of times, we have the access to the individuals. We're not going to change their mind if they feel against it, if they're not if they're not on board with our idea. But the bottom line is, folks, we have the access. We have the access. And that's all we can ask for, a good conversation with someone who's making those decisions that's affecting our children and our community. So again, I thank Debbie so much. I thank Jackie, that's my sister. She's become my sister in the 4 years I've been here, and I love her dearly, as well as Gina Williams as well. She just came on to the organization, but she's hit the ground running, and I know she's very strong on education as well. So all you guys
Thank you
are
so
welcome
much.
to join the organization. I'll help you do whatever we need to do, and thank you.
Thank you
And
so
look,
much,
I'm in my
Derek.
office,
Out of all
8:30 at
of
night
that,
on a
I
playoff,
really
on
wanted
an
you to
NBA
say,
playoff night.
out of all of that, I wanted you to say what you do. And Derek is the National Crisis Director for National Action Network. He is also the New York State Field Director for National Action
Let
Network.
me tell you this is
And
the
he's
first
a
time I
great
had a job
resource.
with a significant title. And at the end of the day, I'm a community organizer. So I don't get wrapped up in titles. I help all the committees, all the chapters.
That is your outreach. And I want to connect Rocio with Derek, because you said something about getting your Bronx chapter back up. And Rocio is a great parent leader to connect. Rocio, if it's good with you, I would love to.
Yeah, I'll put my contact information early in the chat. Please connect with me any way you can. Jackie got my number. Text me, email me. If you have an idea, if you want to get it done, let's go.
And
again, a lot of people call Reverend Sharpton every day, 100 calls a day. Can Rev do this? Can Rev do that? And I'll entice them, I'll entertain a conversation, but about a minute, 2-3 minutes in the conversation, I'm gonna ask them, are you a NAN member?
Right.
And it shocks me that everybody asking Reverend Sharpton for a whole bunch of stuff, but they're not a member. So I just implore you guys to be members. Let's utilize what he's built in 31 years and just use it the right way. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. So we're about to close out, but before we close out, I would like to give my counterpart, the chair of the Manhattan chapter for the Education Committee, Gina, if you could take just a moment you know, because we
Yes.
can't get it back from Derek.
Yes.
But if you could
No,
take a
I'm only
moment.
going to be a moment. Thank you, Dr. Cody, and thank you, Derek. And once again, this was a fabulous Zoom. And Debbie, it's good to see you again. I haven't seen you, I think, since the last CEC5 meeting. But you're with Harlem Women Strong, so that's a great organization with Wilma Brown Phillips. And so we are glad that we passed this resolution, and we're going to get other people to sign on and try to get this into law, because I think.
Hold on, Gina, I'm sorry. That's District Leader Wilma Brown.
Wilma Brown Phillips, that's correct, for the 70th AD Part C. Thank you, Derek. So let's just funnel out our information and let's try to rally up our troops and get more parents involved at the table, especially our parents that are in public schools. So we have to get creative with some type of form of outreach that is going to be more effective and bring them to the table. But I think that this was a marvelous turnout, and I look forward to the next. Dr. Cody, did you mention the citywide leadership on May 16th?
Oh, thank you. Well, you know what? I forgot. It's in the resolution, but not the date. So yes, please email us if you want to attend the next Citywide Leadership Team Summit. Thank you for reminding me, Gina. It's on
Absolutely.
May 16th at 9:30 in the morning. You can email nyc.clt1@gmail.com to receive, to be added on the distribution list. One of my co-developers, yeah, she's still on, Monique Lindsay, is a co-developer as well. And I also want to give a shout out to you all there, and to both Ginas there at the House of Justice, holding it down in person. Oh, and
Hi, Debbie. Dolores.
Dolores, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. So with that said, we'll bid everyone a good night. You have the email addresses. Please email us. Please keep in touch. And the link for the May 12th event, we will send that out again. If you didn't get it in the chat, we will definitely send it out if you can email us as well. So what was that was just put in? Queens, Staten Island.
That's the Developmental Disability Councils in New York City. I think that would be a great outreach. And again, I'll connect with everyone.
Thank you, Rosie. You see that? You see, Derek? You see how Rosie moved? You see that? So I gotta connect you all for sure. All right. Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Please stay safe.
Have a good night.
All right. See you all May 16th. I'm on. I'm still on. What's the matter? I don't want you to smell my wrist. Good job, ladies. Good job. So let me spell it. So what time tomorrow? Well, we'll figure it out. We'll text back and forth and Debbie and figure out when we can talk and debrief. You're on mute, Debbie.
Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Janelle. It's nice to meet you. Definitely
You
be in
too.
touch.
Take care. Bye-bye.
You're on mute, Debbie. You're on mute.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Janelle is more flexible on Thursdays and Fridays because she does work for the DOE. And I'm not sure what she can do during the day as a DOE employer, but
no, I wanted to speak to you just real quick. You know what I mean? Just to debrief and next steps and so forth. So we'll talk sometime tomorrow.
Okay.
All right.
Gina, it was great to see you.
Gina Williams, she's on mute.
Yes. Oh, yes. It was great to see you too.
Yeah.
Hold on. Hi, Debbie, it's Dolores. How are you?
Hi, Dolores. How are you? Oh, you came in person. Oh,
I was gonna see you, but we'll definitely connect soon. Hi, Debbie. Yeah, it's great. And then we have Learning Ally here.
Hey. I'm so glad you guys. Oh,
in person, yeah.
You got your fan group.
Yeah, my fan group.
All right.
Oh.
Glad to be here. Very glad to be here.
Dolores, I'm about to walk my dogs. I can walk right up to the House of Justice. Do you guys have a little more time?
I said, I'm getting ready to go, but I'll definitely reach out to you so we can connect.
Okay.
They turned the light out on them.
Yeah, we're gonna go. All right.
All right. Good night, everyone.
All right, thank you.
Night. Thanks.
All right, thank